What's up, everybody? We're back with another episode of CADS's podcast series, A League of Our Own. My name is Aaron Duncan, and I'm your host and also the education coordinator for CADS National. And today we have a very special guest joining us. She is a senior student athlete on the track and field team at Penn State University, where she is pursuing a bachelor's of science in kinesiology with an emphasis in movement science. At her university, she has been named a Big Ten Conference Distinguished Scholar, Women's Indoor Track and Field Sportsmanship Honoree, a six-time Dean's List recipient, three-time Penn State Letter Award winner, and the Big Ten All Academic Team selection. Everyone, please welcome Audra Koopman.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to agree to do this.
Of
I know,
course.
yeah, I appreciate you, you know, sharing your experiences with everyone. And yeah, so yeah, we're just gonna hop straight into it. I wanted to start off by asking you, we know that the past year has been like an extremely difficult time period in the lives of um, Black student athletes and like our Black community in America at large, um, which means that mental health is something very essential right now for all of us. So I just wanted to start by asking you, like, what are some ways you've been taking care of yourself during this time, during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think just kind of like what you said, right now it's imperative to take care of ourselves and to focus on self-care and me time. And I wasn't really good at that until COVID hit and I didn't have anything to do but me time. But right now, just since I'm, so busy and we all have, exams and classes and stuff like that, I've been prioritizing my sleep more lately and making sure that I go to bed at like 10 or 11 and I kind of like settle down before then. Spending just some time at night to chill and relax and not be so like hectic before I go to bed. I've also, when we have like off weekends, I've been trying to kind of pamper myself and just chill and relax at least for one day. But also something that I think is important for everybody in the Black community during this time is to be kind with yourself and forgive yourself and not be so hard. I know with everything going on we can all get pretty overwhelmed, and so it's important to just have that forgiveness with yourself and be able to give yourself a break.
Definitely, yeah, I definitely agree. Um, I've been fortunate too to have some time to prioritize some of those things that we don't get to think about when
Right.
everything's normal, because like we have a schedule that's super crammed, and it's like you're just doing every day, like you're just kind of going through the motions, and you don't have time to like that often to like sit down and just like breathe, and
Mhm.
just take some weight off your shoulders. So uh everything's the pandemic's definitely been good in that way for me also.
Good.
But yeah, so next I wanted to kind of ask a little bit about your background. Um, so would you just tell us a little bit about your background, the community you come from, and kind of your family?
Yeah. So originally, I was born in Seattle and I moved when I was really young to Fort Collins, Colorado. It's more of a smaller town, extremely white, and it's where Colorado State University is. So I grew up in a college town. Um, I lived with my mom. My mom is a single mother. I'm also mixed, so my mom is white and my dad is black. Um, and I'm really familiar with my mom's side of the family, not so much my dad's. But we lived in a Habitat for Humanity home together, and we actually still live there, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, I would say my community was pretty whitewashed. Not a lot of diversity. The rest of my mom's side of the family is actually from Nebraska, so also not a lot of diversity there. Um, but my dad's side of the family is from California, and I actually just kind of met them 2 summers ago. So I don't really have that great of relationship on that side. But I would say, youth, when I was a youth, I was just, a talented athlete. I did a lot of sports. And I was involved in a lot of, sports communities with
Mhm.
tennis, track, volleyball, all that stuff. I would say I had a lot of white friends, and all the schools that I went to from elementary to high school were predominantly white schools, probably like 2% Black students, which is kind of the same at Penn State.
Mhm.
Um, and I would say that, the only Black friends that I really had were athletes and those who I, competed with. I was also involved in a few, I would say, like Black student groups that were offered for youth at the university. So that helped me kind of expand my group of friends. But other than that, I was really focused on academics and athletics, and I didn't really have time for much else.
Right. Okay. Yeah. With that, I kind of also wanted to ask you, how did, I guess, coming from those circumstances, kind of shape your identity, in the way like you viewed the world or your positionality in the world, for having to go off to college at Penn State.
Yeah, yeah. I would say um, until I came to college, I wasn't really aware of my personal blackness or how racism and microaggressions affected me. Just because, and I think a lot of student athletes can agree with this. I was a great athlete. I was a talented athlete, great student, and that's what people saw me as. To them, I was kind of a talented athlete, great student who happened to be Black, and nobody really talked about it.
Mm.
Um, and so I would say that people loved me because I was an athlete, and I didn't really notice like the tokenism or me being put on a pedestal. But I did in high school recognize that I didn't have as many friends when it wasn't track season as I did when it was track season. Um, and so I mean, not a lot of people, I would say, in high school and middle school are aware of, their identity, and especially if they're, mixed children in white communities. But I don't know. It was just, I feel like it kind of gave me, a platform of experiences that I could I guess, talk about and relive and kind of like dissect when I got to college. Because there were, microaggressions and little teeny bits of racism and stuff like that that happened to me when I was in middle school or elementary school or high school that I didn't really realize because I wasn't really aware that I
Yeah.
was like Black, and that played into something. I was just like, oh, I'm different and I'm good at these things, and people
Mhm.
like me because of that. So um, I wouldn't say that, it really stunted me at all. I think that it gave me a good background to grow off of and learn from, especially now when I'm, super into all of, the racial injustice and stuff like that I am now.
Yeah. It's really crazy hearing you, say that about like the tokenism and everything that you face, because last week when I met with our first guest, she's from PG County,
Mm,
which is in Maryland. I mean, in the Washington D.C. area, and it's a predominantly Black neighborhood, like, and
right.
it's very economically prosperous. But
Mm,
she literally said the exact same thing
no
that you
way.
did, in terms of like us being Black student athletes who excel in our sport and are really good students, like being having the experience of being tokenized
Yeah.
throughout uh, our youth and throughout high school and everything, and that kind of privileging us to um, not necessarily having to think about race or anything, and not having to not being able to see how race has affected us throughout our education, right? So
Mm,
like how you said, like even for me, like it wasn't until I came to college and, was exposed to race and what that meant, the implications that had on my life, that I was like, wow, like I've actually, experienced racism and microaggressions and all these things throughout my education, but never really knew how to describe it or knew what it was or what to call it, because I was privileged in that way. So that's really crazy hearing you say that um, your experience kind of paralleled that of mine and also our previous guests. So
yeah, yeah, I'd say especially in my town, I think it's a little bit more of a liberal town, but I think a lot of people teach their children and themselves to be colorblind. And so
Right.
oftentimes, when you're a young Black child in that community, it's kind of harmful and potentially hurtful because you don't really, get to kind of experience that. Nobody really talks to you about it, and nobody addresses the elephant in the room. So yeah, that's interesting that we can relate on that. Also kind of disappointing, but
Yeah. So yeah, now I wanted to move move into kind of starting to get into your college experiences and the transition from coming from your home community to attending Penn State. So I guess what are some of the factors that contributed to your decision to attend Penn State? And I guess who was included in helping you make this decision?
yeah. First, I would say who was included in helping me make the decision was my high school coach. She actually ran for Penn State. And so she was the one who, wore all the Penn State gear and was kind of like, hey, if you're thinking about colleges, maybe you should look at Penn State. And so she was the one that kind of put the bug in my ear and allowed me to actually reach out to Penn State. Um, and so I would say, out of all my visits, Penn State was the one that offered the most, college-like atmosphere that you see in the movies. And that was something that I was kind of after. I wasn't really looking for a super crazy heavy academic load because I wanted to focus on athletics as well. And so I wanted kind of like that balance of, I'm a college athlete, so I can get the gear and I can have fun and I can go to the football games and there's a large alumni association. And it kind of feels like the movies. I guess that's kind of cliche to say. Um, but that's kind of what I got at Penn State is, everybody has their pride. Penn State's huge,
Mm.
walking on the campus, I saw, a lot of different students and stuff like that. And so, um, and I got to know the team and all that. So it was really, the atmosphere was different from any other college that I had visited.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, so I'd say that my high school coach kind of had a little piece in that, but also my mom helped me. She was on some of the visits with me, and she really loved Penn State, and she used to work at the University of Nebraska, which has a big football program as well. And so she saw Penn State's football program, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, this is like the same. This is awesome."
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I would say ultimately it was my decision. My mom kind of took a passenger role in my decision of a college, which I think was really helpful because I got to see the pros and cons in all the colleges, and I got to make the decision for where I felt like I wanted to go or where I felt that I would be the most successful. And I ended up, making spreadsheets and documents for each school that I visited to compare them, what they would offer, and what I would major in, how big their population is, all that stuff. And so for me, I just wanted to find the place that would give me the best opportunity to be successful in athletics and academics.
Yeah, I think that's really remarkable how you were able to I guess really be patient and consider all things when making that decision. I've never heard of anybody doing that, like putting together spreadsheets and like
Yeah.
actually like analyzing the pros and cons of that decision. So that's a really cool thing, and I can only imagine like the sort of athletic excellence it can breed being at a university like Penn State, where there is so much pride in the sports and everything like that. Um, and also recognize how that might be isolating in some ways, you being, a small fish in such a big pond. So
Right.
could you kind of either talk about, the ways that you did feel celebrated when you first got to Penn State being a high profile athlete and everything in that nature, or also the ways that you may have felt isolated, being in such a huge environment.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that I kind of felt well, I did feel kind of like, respected and excited that or people were excited that I was there just because when they have freshman recruits, they post them and they have their whole like recruiting lineup and you have your signing day and everything. So I was excited to, you know, get to rep Penn State and get to, be at a D1 institution. Like, I made it. You know what I'm saying? I get to do the workouts, I get to do the work, I get to go to the meets. Um, but I would say that I felt a little bit isolated just because I did come from so far away. And most of the people who go to Penn State are, from around the DMV area or just Pennsylvania in general. Um, so I didn't really have, I didn't have like friends from high school that I knew. And so I had to make, all new friends, and I had to get to know my teammates and things like that. Um, but I would also say my mom never went to, like a big college like Penn State. And so I was kind of unaware of, how things worked, or what it would be like. And so I felt like there wasn't really that many people who were going through the same thing as I was, like homesickness and just not really understanding how things work on the East Coast. I remember when I did finally come, I was like, oh my gosh, people are so rude here. Because like, in Colorado, if you're at a stop sign or something, someone will like wave you through,
Mhm.
or someone will open the door for you, and that just like doesn't really happen over here, which is just the culture, and I got used to it. But I remember that was one of the things I was like, oh my gosh, they're so rude. Like, how am I, how am I gonna like live here? But yeah, I think especially in sports, coming to a new university and having just that built-in like friend system of your team and I enjoyed how being part of a sports team gives you kind of that like built-in family, built-in friends, where I had roommates, and I had teammates who I could call on for like if I was being homesick or anything like that. And so it gives you that kind of like built-in family, and a lot of good relationships that you can build on. So I appreciated that, and that made me feel less isolated.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I remember when, even though Davis is only about like 50 minutes to an hour away from home for me, I remember because I was a preferred walk-on, so I didn't show up to campus early in the summer with the rest of the football players. So when I did get there um, around the start of school, I didn't really know anybody. Whereas like all the other freshmen I was within the dorms. They had already established relationships and everything. Kind of, I felt kind of isolated because I
Right.
just hadn't been there. I hadn't been there yet, and so I kind of had to get to know everybody. And even during that time, I felt kind of isolated, kind of homesick,
Yeah.
um, which I wasn't expecting at all. But just like you said, being a part of that team environment, and even though you're waking up at like 6 a.m., the only thing that's keeping you like disciplined to do that every day is the fact that everybody else has to do it, right? You have teammates that are doing the same exact thing as you, so that just kind of helps me get through everything. So yeah, I
Right.
definitely I definitely appreciate the built-in relationships that sports provides for us when we're making the jump from high school to college to these super large environments. We already have a group of people that we can already identify with in
Yeah.
yeah. So um although at the same time I do feel like in a lot of ways my experiences as a student athlete kind of kept me for a while. It prevented me from being able to, I guess, venture out into other groups of students and form relationships with those other groups of students. And that was a huge reason why we founded CADSA, was because we noticed the divide between the Black student athlete population and the normal or the general Black student population on our campus, and we kind of wanted to bridge that gap. So that was it wasn't until about last year that I really got into um, working with other organizations on campus and working with other students, and really pushing myself to step outside my um, athlete circle and to really form social networks with other students. um, and I know you kind of shared the same sentiment with me when we talked privately before, so I was just hoping you could speak more on your experiences with that as well.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say I think I'm not alone in this, but it's easy to be with a team. you don't
Hmm.
have to like them, but you, like you said, you're all doing the same thing. And
Yeah.
so for me, that's an easy way to make friends. And going outside of that circle is not as easy, especially here. It's hard to find the general Black student population. You kind of have to search for it, and find those connections elsewhere. Um, so yeah, I totally understand that. I don't think I really um, I don't think I really understood that my first 2 years here, just because I was so engulfed in sport. And um, you know, a lot of students, a lot of regular students, when they come to school, they're introduced through like new student orientation and look at all these great groups that we have. Here you can get involved in this and this and this. Where as for athletes, we're focused on um, learning the warm-ups and doing the
Yeah.
workouts and trying to make a good impression on the coach and learning our classes and stuff like that. And so I didn't really get the time to explore that and to make friends through that, because that's where a lot of people make their friends.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, just like you, it wasn't until I think last year when I actually kind of branched out and was like, hey, there's more things that I can be doing than just athletics and sticking my head in books.
Hmm.
And I need to embrace that and kind of venture out of my circles if I want to, stand a chance in the real world where it's not just athletes. Um, so yeah, I'd say being a student athlete at a big university kind of robs you of uh, and limits your pursuit of extracurricular activities and your
Hmm.
pursuit of other relationships, because you have so much on your plate already. You got practice for X amount of hours a day, you got recovery, you have your classes, and then you have to study for your classes. Freshman year, you have study hall, things like that. And while that can be a great environment and you can have great friends and you can have great success there, it's not really going to benefit you that much outside of school, because you
Hmm.
need to be able to make friends outside of athletics, and you need to have more on your resume than just being an athlete. And so I think that kind of disadvantages us for after sport.
Hmm.
But and I would also say being an athlete, especially at a big D1 school, kind of robs you of other intellectual pursuits. I've heard of so many people where kind of their sport and the time that they need to devote to their sport actually influences their major.
Yeah.
And their coaches influence their major, and you want to do this hard major because you're passionate about it, but you can't
Yeah.
because you don't have enough time. And so yeah, I think that kind of just puts a stunt on what we're able to do and what we're able to pursue, especially in college, when that's the time that you're supposed to kind of like venture out of your comfort zone and figure out what you like and what you're passionate about.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I remember when I first got to Davis, like I was super passionate, super I guess ambitious and wanted to do engineering. And I remember like when I went in, I was in engineering my first 2 years, and when I went into my first advising meeting with the engineering advisor, she was just like, she just kept telling me like, you're not going to be able to do this while playing football and like all this other stuff. And so that was super discouraging. Um, and I stayed in the major a lot longer than she thought I would, but it really was only because I identified my passion elsewhere that I did switch my major and not end up doing that. But I do think in a lot of ways that the experience can rob us of those opportunities to do whatever we want in any space associated with our experience as college student athletes. But at the same time, I think that's what really makes student athletes such as yourself and other leaders at our campuses truly remarkable, is the fact that we've learned how to adapt and cope and be able to handle our business like in our sport, but also in the classroom, and still be able to, I don't know how we do it, but find the time to do those things and exist in other spaces not associated with athletics at all. So yeah, that's definitely what I wanted to highlight in this.
Yeah, I think your point about advisors, we can go on a whole different conversation about that, because most of the time your college advisors do undermine your work ethic and your intellectual ability because you are an athlete, you know? There have been so many times where I'm like, well, I want to take this class with this class, and my advisor is like, are you sure?
Yeah.
You know, are you like, can you do that? I'm not really sure about that. But you know, you have to be able to advocate for yourself and know your strengths and your weaknesses. And
Mhm.
luckily, you know, that's how I was raised, to
Yeah.
understand those and to work on those. But not a lot of kids are,
Mm.
especially because you know, being a college athlete isn't necessarily a choice for some kids.
Yeah.
Me, I know that I wouldn't probably have gone to college if Penn State didn't give me the opportunity to go with, you know, things paid for. And so, you know, you can get kids in poor situations, in low income communities, who don't know how to advocate for themselves and who don't have, you know, those great mentors, and they come into a place that is supposed to benefit them and give them education, when in reality they're just, you know, changing the course of their lives, and kind of putting these restraints on what they can and cannot do. And um, I think that that's another downfall of college athletics. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, just to, I wanted to emphasize something there, and then we'll go ahead and move on. But
Mhm.
I think self advocacy, like
Yeah.
specifically in our community, is so huge. Just because, like, being black, like we don't always grow up knowing how to navigate these institutions and having the tools to be able to advocate for ourselves, and really not give people in positions of authority or higher power the ability to kind of influence us in a way and restrict, our possibilities, our futures in that way. So I know that's not a skill that came easy to me. It's something that's still being built as I'm in
Like,
school. Yeah, like that's nothing that I grew up with at all. But luckily, I did have parents and people who, have been to college that were able to advocate for me. And, but I think that's something that, all students of color, all students from all marginalized communities need to have in order to truly be successful, is really knowing how to navigate institutions and, advocating for ourselves. So
yeah.
I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Mhm.
Yeah. So feeding off of that, I kind of wanted to transition into a conversation about just the stuff you have been doing outside of the space of athletics. More recently, we talked about how all the events that took place last year with the Black Lives Matter movement and the murders of unarmed Black people in our country, kind of facilitating you into a position where now you're involved, heavily involved in organizing and public speaking and things of that nature. So I just wanted to ask, how did you get into organizing and protesting and just using your platform, I guess, to speak up for change?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, you know, when COVID hit and nothing really was going on, um, I think for a lot of people, all of the social and racial injustices that were going on were brought to the forefront because nothing
Mhm.
else was happening but that was continuing. And so I realized when I was home at over the summer, not really, you know, doing anything, that I had this platform, and I had people who recognized me and knew me, at home and here on campus, and I wasn't using that platform. I wasn't doing anything with it, you know, and it was just kind of sitting there. And I think that that was something that should have been utilized. And so um, I was seeing everything on social media, and happening in my town and around the United States, and I wanted to do something about it. And my friend, she was organizing a protest at the police department in Fort Collins, and she had asked me to, you know, write a prayer to say, after she was done speaking. And so, you know, after that happened, I that kind of just sparked my interest, and that sparked kind of my passion. I saw, you know, how people responded to, you know, how I was speaking. I saw friends there who, you know, came up and talked to me afterwards and stuff like that. And um, I think that that really, you know, made it known to me that this was something that I was passionate about, and this is something that I wanted to do more. And so yeah, like I said, that sparked my interest for marching and organizing and protesting, and that's basically what I did over the summer. So I met two friends at a different protest, and like I said, Fort Collins is super white, kind of liberal, but they don't really have a great grasp on race and race relations and racial injustice. There's really, not a lot going on in that aspect. And so I met these two friends and we decided to organize a march. We called it the March for Change 2020. And I wanted it to be a big event. I wanted it to be a staple in, Fort Collins's summer of 2020, because I felt like people needed to be educated. And I felt like something that was put on by, student activists in the community would spark something, because other people, other youth, other students would see other people their age doing it and potentially follow suit or speak out a little bit more. And so um, I really wanted to make it something that was symbolic and also educational. And it turned out to be really awesome. There were so many people that wanted to help, and people who came out of nowhere just asking, if they could promote what they're doing, or talk about what they're doing, or help us. And so that was really awesome. Um, and then I started to attend some protests in Denver. There was one at the Capitol that was pretty scary. I went to the Elijah McClain protest and march in Aurora, Colorado. And we marched down the middle of the highway, which was incredible. Just seeing, how a mass of people can stop the world from moving. It can stop people from getting to where they need to go, because it's something that's like super important. Um, Fortunately, we left before, everything happened. But yeah, I would say over the summer was when I really found that this is something that I'm interested in, and something that public speaking comes naturally to me, and I don't really have an outlet for that. And so something that I'm passionate about, and something that I'm learning about every day, is something that I want to share with other people, because I think it's something that everyone should be learning about.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's really unique how you can use your skills in terms of public speaking um, to also help other people, and to help other lives, things of that nature. So um, I guess next I wanted to ask about what you and the Black Student Caucus have been doing with the 320 Coalition, specifically last summer with the Breonna Taylor protests.
Yeah. Yeah. So over summer, Olivia Jack started Penn State Black Student Athletes, and we kind of collaborated on that. And so, she was going hard in her social activism. I was going hard at my social activism, and we decided that we needed a space for Black student athletes at Penn State, because there never had been one. We have Black administrators, and apparently it never crossed their mind to start something like that. So after that happened, we're still kind of slowly starting it up. I think the president of the Black Caucus reached out to me, and we kind of collaborated there too. And then, the 320 Coalition. So we got together, and it was right after the incorrect decision was made on Breonna Taylor's case, and we were all mad. We were all pissed, and something needed to happen. So we organized a vigil and a march, just hoping, that a lot of people would come out, because it was really close to right after, all those decisions were made, and everyone was mad on social media. So I was like, come out and say it and talk about it. um, so so yeah, we had that visual, we had that march. It went really great. We really showcased Black women, overall, because Breonna Taylor was a Black woman, and we wanted to make sure that, our voices and their voices were heard. And it was something that was really awesome, because there was a lot more people that came out than we thought would come out. And the march went well. And I think it was something that State College kind of needed a little bit, at least just a start. So
So yeah, just to your point about showcasing Black women at that march, actually have a quote that from you at that march that I found from one of the articles online that I wanted to share. I didn't. and it kind of goes perfectly because you emphasize the point of Black women and them being showcased at this march. But I'll go ahead and read it. You can react to it if you want. I just really thought it was a really great quote, and that people should hear this. So it says, "We are Black women. We empower. We build. We love. We sustain. We want to be heard. We want to be empathized with. We want our experiences as all different kinds of Black women to be validated. We deserve better. Brianna deserved better. Justice for Brianna."
Yeah. Yeah, that was the I guess ending paragraph of my speech at the Breonna Taylor protest. And I specifically catered it towards Breonna Taylor and Black women because you look out into the audience and you see a lot of white people. You don't see a lot of Black women, and so it's important to highlight our experiences and area. And not a lot of people understand how Black women felt after the decision regarding Breonna Taylor's murder. And so that piece about validation, that piece about Black women coming in all different shapes and sizes and wanting to be heard and seen. And Black women being the uplifters and the nurturers in all communities is something that makes the Breonna Taylor decision hurt more, because we know those things and because we are those things. Yeah, I just wanted to get that across in my speech, and so I'm grateful that they picked that quote. I liked that as well.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So next, I wanted to mention something that you've been more involved in recently. Um, Actually, right before I met with you, I had I had seen that you had recently just been involved in an event called 10 Days of Action for Osaze. So, could you please briefly let everybody know who Osaze was, and I guess who the 320 Coalition is?
Yeah. Yeah, so Osaze Osagi was a 29-year-old African male who um, lived in State College. His parents were professors. Him and his siblings went to the State College schools. They're well known around here. Um, and he had a history of mental illness and mental health issues that were known. And he had recently, I think, been released from a facility, and he was able to rent an apartment with one of his friends because he was stable enough to be on his own. Um, and the things that I've heard from his friends and from his parents and from articles is that he was characterized as joyful and a peacemaker, and super helpful. And at the 10 days of action, we actually had a protest, and his best friend spoke. And so hearing everything she said about Osaze just from her perspective was really powerful. Sorry, like froze for a sec. Um, it was really powerful. She spoke about him and how he helped her through actually the death of her brother from police brutality again. And so that was really heartwarming to just hear how good of a person he was from first from someone's point of view who knew him. But I think one day his father was kind of worried about his safety just because of some texts that he had gotten from Osaze, and so um, he reluctantly called the police. Obviously, we know how they handle mental health situations, and um, they served a 302 warrant. There were three police officers, and they covered the peephole for whatever reason, um, so that Osaze couldn't see them. And within 30 seconds of Osaze opening the door, they shot him three times in the back. So that happened 320 2019, and so right after that was when the 320 coalition was founded to bring justice for Osaze. I think it was only this year, only in 2021, when they finally released the names of the three officers involved, and the officer who did shoot him was deemed unfit for duty before he was serving that warrant. So um, there are there are a list of demands that have been made by the 320 Coalition that have not been met. And day after day and month after month, you know, they're putting signs on the municipal building, they're having protests, and they're just trying to fight for justice for him because there are a lot of things that were wrong, and justice needs to be brought, you know,
Yeah.
especially in a place that's like in our backyard. You know, that happened about like half a mile away from where I live now. So um, things can happen really close to you, and it just provides perspective.
Yeah. Um, I'll also put the list of demands that the 320 Coalition came out with. I'll put those attached to this video as well, along with the article, the magazine article about Osaze and his legacy. But just from my reading of what had gone on, it was just really disheartening, especially with, I guess, the current context of what's going on in our country. And I kind of alluded to this when we met last time. Um, this was right after the mass shooting in your home state, Colorado, at the grocery store, where a man murdered 10, innocent individuals in the grocery store. And then I think 3 days before that, there was the Atlanta um,
Right.
mass murders, yeah, targeting Asian women. So in those two events were on either side of the 2 year anniversary of Osaze's murder by the police. And just to reiterate the dichotomy, like in the so-called justice system, or I guess you can call it injustice system in our country, the fact that Osaze was a black man who was murdered in his own home by police officers, and there were three police officers who, you know, reacted to this incident, and they murdered him in his own home. But then we see things like what happened in Atlanta, mass murders, slaughtering people and killing innocent people, the way that they're treated as a response to their murder. And even what we saw with in Charleston, South Carolina, with Dylan Roof, who, a white supremacist who carried out an execution of black people at a church in South Carolina. After sitting through a church service with them, he opens fire and kills, I think it was 9 individuals. And the police can be seen giving him water and bandaging him up as he sits on the curb after this.
Yeah.
But and the excuse is always mental health, right? We saw with the Atlanta incident, the one of the cops had said, "Oh, he was having a bad day," and it was like, like what the fuck does that mean? Like, excuse my language, but what does
Bullshit.
that mean? Yeah, it's bullshit. Like, most people when they're having a bad day, they go up to their room and go lie in their bed. They don't go murder people. So that's just really a BS excuse. Um, for a 21-year-old to be, murdering people like that. But then we see when black people or people of color are having mental health episodes, they're no threat to anyone other than themselves. Rather than helping them, you know, the instinct is to result to murdering them. We see that in Osaze's case, and we saw that, seen that with plenty of other people of color in our country, and that continues to be an issue. Um, so yeah, it was really saddening to me just to read that and to think about everything else that has gone on in our country related to those type of incidents.
Yeah, I liked how you drew the parallels and the opposites between
Mhm.
how black people with mental health issues are treated totally different than white people with mental health issues. And at least at least for me, I consider that the buffer of white privilege. Um, and it's just, I mean, to me, it's not surprising. It's
Yeah.
disappointing. But it continues to happen. And we see it so many times. 302 warrants should not be served by police. And they should be served by people who are trained um, to correctly de-escalate those situations without leaving a dead black body. You know what I'm saying? And taking that away from families. And so, yeah, just seeing those parallels makes me angry. It makes me mad. But it also, means that there's a much larger issue at hand with just like the whole infrastructure. But yeah, I'd say fighting for Osaze has been um, a very eye-opening experience because going to school, going to college in a different town, I never really, I guess, thought that police brutality would come knocking, on the door. And especially now that I've gotten to know his friends and his family and the people that are fighting for him, it's definitely something that hits a little bit more close to home, and something that I'm more passionate about because I've learned from other people what he was about, and it was close to me. And so um, obviously I knew this was a problem beforehand. And everybody says when it hits you closer,
Yeah.
you feel it more. And so that's what everybody in this community is feeling who actually knows about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it weren't for the passion and the resilience of, everybody who cared about him to continue fighting for his justice, this would have been something that was swept under the rug a long time ago, a long time ago. And it's been 2 years, and it's horrible that, we're still having to fight for his justice, for everybody responsible to be held accountable.
Yeah.
So yeah, um, from there, I kind of wanted to transition back into your experience trying to create space for Black student athletes at Penn State, to be able to have spaces where they can exist and be their full selves. I kind of wanted to ask, what have been the challenges and or support that you've received trying to organize for Black student athletes on the Penn State campus?
Okay, yeah. Well, I would say going to a PWI, it hasn't been very easy. I think that is is you can already tell that because there has never been a Penn State, Black student athletes organization, and we do have Black administrators who are athletic directors, and they haven't thought about it. So it took students to start that organization. So I think that is very telling about the racial climate of Penn State athletics.
Mhm.
But I would say most of the leaders in athletics, most of the coaches and the administrators are white. And so they see starting these conversations about race and racial injustice as infringing on student athletes' beliefs or, I guess, I wouldn't say privacy, but infringing on their personal space and on their beliefs. When basically we're just talking about basic human rights, and that they're student athletes of color, want to be treated right, and don't want to have microaggressions at freaking practice, like um, and so the administrators that I've been around, and the athletic directors, they may be Black, they may be white, and if they're Black, they have assimilated to uphold the white power structure that athletics is. And I think that there can be parallels drawn to slavery here, because most people on sports teams are Black or not white, and most owners, most coaches, most administrators, most stakeholders are white, and so they profit off the athleticism, off the work ethic of those Black students. And so I think that that's what makes it a little bit harder to speak out and to want to have those spaces and those conversations about something that affects kind of a portion of the athletic salary, and the coach's salary, and what the school makes. Um, so I think at least um, Penn State men's soccer has done a good job of having those conversations. They do have a smaller team, but they've had those conversations with parents and with coaches. And maybe their coaches are a bit more progressive, but I think a lot of the other coaches are just focused on winning in athletics, and bringing something in that may cause a little bit of chaos or a little bit of a disruption to their goals is something that's not really supported. Um, I know that with our team, and with Penn State football, they made the Penn State United thing that they put on their jerseys, and we were given, some stickers that had that thing on that we could put on our jerseys. Well, I mean, it's stickers on uniform material. It doesn't really stick. And we got a limited number of them, and I mean, I used all mine up during the indoor season, so I don't really have any more. But also we got Penn State United shirts, and I was asking when we were going to wear them as like a dress code for, travel or for a meet. And I was told that we haven't had a conversation with our whole team about social injustice and, Penn State we are united, and so we can't force people to wear them. After that conversation, it changed, and now we are wearing them. But it is a little disheartening to see people wear them and not really understand the full scope of it. Um, but yeah, I'd say the barriers are, not having a good relationship with your coach anymore. If you continue to speak up about the things that are going wrong in the on the team or in the athletics department, you're at risk for losing your scholarship or just getting bad treatment by the coaches. Fortunately, I haven't gotten that. I think that most of my coaches are at least on board somewhat with it. They just don't speak up about it, which is being complicit anyways.
Mhm.
Um, but I'd say that the support that I've had would be from my partner, for sure. Um, he's taught me things, and we've talked about a lot of things, and I can always guarantee that he will be there at the marches or things like that where I'm speaking. Also, some of my friends and teammates will always, you know, support me and like the stuff that I post on social media. There's been a lot of people that have tried to start some conversations on social media, which I think is really helpful. Um, but yeah, I'd say that um, probably after my sports career is finished, I think that it'll be a little bit easier to get in and kind of overcome some of those barriers that I have while also being like under the NCAA's rule and guidelines and being kind of quote unquote employed by the school.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just to echo that, I think the biggest problem I have with the whole ordeal surrounding um, spaces for, I don't know, issues related to race or inclusion in intercollegiate athletics is, you know, it just sucks that the NCAA really diminishes its student athletes simply to, what they can produce, how
Right.
much capital they can produce, and that's it, and that's all. Like,
Mhm.
we even seen it like a couple weeks ago, like when the during the NCAA tournament, when the women's teams pointed out their weight rooms and stuff, and it's
Yeah.
like you make like millions of dollars off of the tournament, and
Brilliant.
yeah, and you couldn't even like provide them with a adequate weight room to work out with. Like, it just, even something as small as that shows the lack of investment that the organizational structure of intercollegiate athletics has in its student athletes, right? Like,
Mhm.
we have like a bunch of positions in terms of boards of directors and stuff at our universities within the NCAA, but yet it's the student athletes who have
Right.
to create these spaces for other student athletes
Right.
to feel welcome and to feel, like it makes no sense. Like, we don't get paid for this work.
Hmm.
We get a scholarship to be athletes and to stay eligible, and that's it. But yet, mostly black student athletes, specifically female black student athletes, are the ones having to do the work most of the time on our campuses of deconstructing, I guess, the white power system, and really trying to advocate for black student athletes. And it's really draining, and it really makes me pose the question, like, why do we have all these positions? Why do we have all these coaches? Why do we have all these directors and everything if that's not part of their job description?
Right.
Like, black student athletes shouldn't have to be the ones um, to address issues that everybody else is causing. So that's my biggest issue with it all.
Yeah, and just going back to the NCAA profiting off our work and our ticket sales and the crowds that we bring. We don't even have the rights to our name, image, and likeness. We don't have any other way of profiting. We don't have any other way of making money or using our talents in other ways except for the NCAA. And so I agree. The NCAA is a whole white power structure with internalized racism that can be drawn, parallels to mass incarceration. And so, obviously on a smaller scale, but yeah, I think that I think especially now the NCAA is kind of getting called on some of their shit.
Mhm.
Especially with the March Madness stuff. Like and after people protested and got on their ass about it, they gave them a weight room.
Yeah.
And why didn't you just do that in the first place? So um, yeah, it's interesting how much they, quote unquote, value their athletes and value the $1 billion they're bringing in when we don't see it, and we don't get that. And so yeah, it's very very telling, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah. So I really just admire all just where we're at in terms of athletics, in terms of student athletes, advocating for themselves, using social media and their platforms to, call out these issues and call out um, the blatant disrespect that, these systems are showing towards all of us, not just Black student athletes, but all student athletes. And, that's really causing a lot of things to be put in motion to change right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm definitely proud of all the student athletes that are speaking up and facing backlash or anything like that.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So, lastly, I wanted to move into your career interests and your goals post grad. Um, I guess I just wanted you to address, what it is that you plan to do um, after your graduation in terms of your career, and if you could mention in what ways do your career interests overlap with your experiences as a Black student athlete and the work you've been doing to advocate for individuals in the diaspora.
Yeah. So after I graduate, I want to go to grad school to go for prosthetics and orthotics to be a certified prosthetist and orthotist. That means working with the orthotics that are on your shoes, and also amputees, and developing, prosthetics or artificial limbs. And so that's something that I was interested over this past summer, and I had an internship and I loved it. And I got to work with so many different people. I got to work with older people. I got to work with athletes. I got to work with young kids, babies who need like helmets, and things like that. And so for me, that's a way that I can um, help communities that are low income or don't really have a way of getting a sustainable prosthetic limb or anything like that. And so obviously I have to go through school and I have to get certified and everything like that. But I think right now I'm passionate about speaking up about the harmful and unpleasant experiences of Black people in white spaces. And the prosthetics career field is white, very white and very male dominated. And so um, I definitely want to be, someone who breaks barriers in that aspect. Um, that's something that I'm really passionate about. My dad is an amputee, and my dad and mom met through the U.S. amputee soccer team, which is really awesome. And so that's something that I've been helping with and working with them, just because there are so many kids out there who have congenital limb deficiencies or who have accidents and lose a limb, and they don't know that there are sports out there for them. And so advocating for the amputee um, amputee sports team, amputee soccer team, and advocating with my career choice is something that I hope will allow me to reach those people that just kind of are um, they don't really have those crap. What am I trying to say? They don't really have they don't really have those opportunities in their area, and prosthetists and orthotists are expensive. Insurance is expensive, and so hopefully I can find a way to help people who don't really have those like price ranges. There's also some groups that take prosthetic limbs and go to different countries and help other kids or other people, adults over there that need prosthetic limbs that don't have a prosthetist. So yeah, I think that that's something that I'm definitely passionate about and interested in, and I think that it can overlap with um, my passion for advocating for people who are non-black in white spaces. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I love to hear the career interest just because it gives us like, black student athletes were not a monolith, and
Yeah.
uh, I think your career interests are so unique and so special, and unlike anything I've ever heard of. And I think wherever we can get black black people and black student athletes in whatever spaces, it's it's more than necessary. And I'm excited to hear about your future with that, and just the groundbreaking things you'll be doing in the future.
Thank you, man. I hope to keep advocating and speaking. So hopefully I'll get to continue to have those opportunities at bigger protests and bigger marches, and yeah. So
Hmm. Okay. So now we'll just close with one last question. I wanted to ask for anybody out there, specifically Black student athletes or student athletes in general, um, how would you advise them, I guess, advocating for themselves or using their platforms to speak out about things that matter to them?
yeah. I'd say self advocacy is scary, especially if you're tied to the NCAA or a scholarship or a spot on the team that's dwindling. Um, but my advice is go for it. You're not really going to get what you need if you don't speak up about it. And I say that as something that I also need to learn because it's not going to benefit you if you just let these things go under the radar. If there's something that makes you uncomfortable, if there's something that's not good for you, if there's something that's hurting somebody else, if there are microaggressions or like racist undertones that you're experiencing, speak up about it because there's always going to be someone that's in your corner. If you're speaking up about the right things, about human rights, about things that make you uncomfortable or other black students or student athletes of color uncomfortable and you speak up about it, there are going to be people in your corner that are going to fight with you and fight for you.
Yeah.
You just you have to be confident and you have to be able and be ready to have a discussion and be ready to understand, be ready to talk about how you feel, how it makes you feel, and the history of these things and why it's wrong. But also were we talking about like self-care? Is that what was the other half of the question?
That was all. It was just any advice. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and I would say like we started with, take care of yourself because all of this stuff that's going on, all of this racial injustice, seeing black people murdered on your TL all the time is not comfortable and it's not normal, and we need to kind of just like move away from that a little bit. Take our time with our family, with our friends, self care, things like that. And like I said before, be forgiving with yourself. If you need a chance to just like chill, if you're getting overwhelmed, do that. And potentially call on your friends, call on those people who have sworn to fight with you and to stand with you. Call on them. If you need something done, if you need someone to go to a march or protest and you just like physically can't make it, call on those other people because they said that they're going to help you, and if they don't, then they're not allies, they're not accomplices. So weed out your friend circle for sure.
Definitely. So yeah, that'll conclude our second episode of A League of Our Own. Thank you again, Audra, for
Of course.
volunteering to share your experiences and giving your time to do this.
Heck yeah, it was great. I'm definitely thankful, and thank you for allowing me to come on here and asking me to speak.
definitely. We will have resources provided with this video, and thank you everybody for watching.